The Phantom Archives of Edgar the Architect, and Schale by Gen Kagami. Volume 13. Éveux. The Box of Silence. The Guillotine of Light at La Tourette. Part 2. Untethered from the concept of time, the genius architect Edgar and the pearl-haired youth Schale wander through eternity, retaining their youthful, exquisite forms. Across eras, they traverse the world's renowned architectural works and the maddening constructs Edgar himself once assembled. This is a tranquil, decadent journey through phantom architecture, dissecting space, light, gravity, and the anomalies lurking within through cold, unflinching logic. X. The echo of taboo and the indescribable shadow of a sister. The overwhelming weight of flesh collapsed onto the cold concrete floor. From the white, smooth arms of the clinging woman, the fragrance of viognier, like white peaches on the verge of rotting, rose suffocatingly. The fingertips clutching the hem of Edgar's jet-black vintage coat were no longer the bony digits of a youth, but the blood-warmed, terrifyingly voluptuous fingers of a female. Alan. From Edgar's dry lips, the name of his essence, a name that must never be spoken, spilled like a curse. Edgar's cold reason, which had dissected space and subdued all phenomena through purposefulness and mechanics, was now on the verge of total collapse before this voluptuous mass of flesh. The divine ruler established by Corbusier, named the modular absolute dimension, had been snapped by the raw inundation of meat. The defeat of geometry, the death of reason, and Edgar sensed that the presence of the culprit who had triggered this absurd corporeal metamorphosis was beginning to thickly saturate this corridor where the monk's primary coloured screams writhed. The shadow of that loathsome sister who had dragged Schale into eternal space-time and forced this cursed journey upon them. Torn between terror, anger, and an irresistible fascination, Edgar looked up at the exposed concrete ceiling, béton brute of the monastery, and within this box of absolute silence, he screamed the taboo word he despised most and had never uttered, as if vomiting blood. God! It was a declaration of total defeat as an architect. However, this cruel resonance box viscera built by the maestro Le Corbusier absolutely refused to allow that anguished cry to reach straight to the heavens. Edgar's scream crashed against the rough concrete walls, reflecting complexly and erratically, copulating with the monk's masses of screams, twisting into hideous sonic waves. G-O-D. G-R-R-A. The reverberation muddied, crumbled, and rebounded from the depths of the corridor as an indescribable dissonance. That human vocal cords could never pronounce the true name noise of the loathsome sister named The moment that unpronounceable name vibrated the eardrums, the woman Alan clinging to Edgar's feet gave a violent twitch of her spine. Tear-soaked, long, pearl-coloured eyelashes slowly lifted, and unfocused, wet eyes stared at Edgar. Then, red lips like ripe fruit slowly drew a terribly sensual arc. You called, Edgar? My name. It was neither Schale nor Alan. It was the chillingly beautiful, decadent smile, floated by the will of the sister, waiting at the bottom of the abyss, using the flesh vessel of a woman. The geometry of La Tourette completely collapsed, and the dark myth quietly opened its mouth in the concrete locked room. 11. the chimera of hellfire and the birth of Charlotte. Charlotte. Another taboo name slipped from Edgar's mouth, accompanied by a ring of despair and sweetness. Flames. Even while inside a freezing concrete box, the raging fire of that day ruthlessly scorched Edgar's retinas. That madness of losing the sister who shared his blood, and the subsequent moment when even Alan, who could be called his own half, was about to turn to ash within the crimson hellfire. Edgar had made a pact with something, an indescribable contract to tether the two lost souls at the price of eternal time. He had kneaded Alan's scorched flesh and the grudging spirit of his phantom sister with the plaster named Taboo, reconstructing them into a single new vessel. That was Schale, no, a chimera of Alan and his sister Charlotte, the most blasphemous architecture work Edgar had ever undertaken. That's right. Edgar. The woman, Charlotte, clinging to Edgar's leather shoes, while retaining a faint trace of Alan's visage, whispered with the bewitching smile of his sister. The scent of Viognier's rotting white peaches rode upon her breath, violating Edgar's nostrils. The terrifying geometry of this monastery broke the inorganic exterior wall facade called man that you forced upon me. Look, this is my true skeleton structure that you built within the flames. Charlotte lovingly cradled her own white breasts, which heaved voluptuously beneath the ultra-thin mohair cardigan with both hands. Edgar touched the raw roundness of her shoulder with fingers trembling through his gloves. Hot. An overwhelming thermal pulsation of flesh. As if mocking Corbusier's cold concrete, it scorched his palm with the violent energy of reproduction and maternity. The maddened chimera assembled by the architect Edgar, trespassing into the domain of God. Its seams had melted away in this extreme resonance space of La Tourette, and the suppressed body and will of the sister had torn through Alan's consciousness, thrusting themselves to the surface. A complete failure of design. Edgar pulled the body of that woman, the crystallization of his own sins, close to the cold floor, along with his jet-black vintage coat, and spoke quietly, yet definitively. It seems I had shoved the most absurd thing into this beautiful vessel. You are Alan, and you are my loathsome yet beloved. As if to seal Edgar's words, Charlotte's red lips rubbed against his cold cheek. From the countless opened individual room cells, the primary coloured screams of the monks continued to writhe, as if blessing this blasphemous reunion of brother and sister. The monastery meant to confront God had completely sunk to the bottom of memories of hellfire and lasciviousness. Still embracing the monster he had once created within the flames, Edgar merely drowned deeply in the dark fever. 12. The second prayer and the residual heat of Pearl. It was then, as if dragging the womb of madness up from the deep sea, that mass of thick voices echoed for the second time today. Amen. The resumption of the monk's practice. The moment the gargantuan concrete viscera once again caused a howling bordering on violence, the flesh of the woman in Edgar's arms blurred violently, like footage laced with static. A physical mass of sonic waves struck Edgar's eardrums and brain head-on. His vision flickered, and the heavy weight of the voluptuous flesh he should have been embracing suddenly vanished, as if it had been a lie. Edgar, who had been overusing his reason to the limit, had his consciousness reaped into the bottom of that heavy, dark, acoustic abyss, without time to resist. Edgar. Hey, Edgar. A cold sensation stroked his cheek. When Edgar lifted his heavy eyelids, he was in the dead, silent concrete corridor, lined with identical cell doors. The masses of primary-coloured screams, the suffocating scent of white peaches, they were nowhere to be found. Schale. Looking down at Edgar was the ennui-laden, translucently beautiful youth, clad in the dove-wing-coloured mohair cardigan. The chest of the raw silk was flat, and the bony, straight shoulder line proved beyond a doubt that he was a man. I was surprised when you suddenly collapsed. I knew last night's coat roti was too heavy. Did the thin air of this monastery make the drunkenness go to your head? Schale furrowed his pearl-coloured brows in worry, extending a slender arm to help Edgar up. His voice, his gestures, it was the usual Schale. The bug brought about by the geometry of La Tourette seemed to have been completely reset along with that second hymn. Ah, perhaps so. This box seems to have been slightly disagreeable to my reason. Edgar grabbed Schale's arm with his gloved hand and slowly stood up. However, at that moment, Edgar's jet-black eyes caught the area around Schale's eyes at point-blank range, and he faintly gasped. Usually, Schale's pearl-coloured eyes vaguely slipped through the air, but now, deep within the pupils staring back at Edgar, a terribly sensual, viscous heat was scorched, as if clearly remembering the events from moments ago. For a fleeting second, it perfectly overlapped with the gaze of her Charlotte, who had smiled within those flames. Is something wrong? Edgar. Schale tilted his head. By then, the heat deep within his eyes had vanished, returning to the face of an innocent youth. No, it's nothing. Edgar adjusted the collar of his jet-black vintage coat, donning his cold mask once more. Shall we go, Schale? This box of silence is a bit too loquacious for us right now. The sound of their leather shoes began to echo in the cold concrete corridor once again. Without ever looking back at the homogeneous doors lined up behind them, they quietly slipped out of those maddened viscera. End of Part 2, Volume 13.